everyone, welcome back to my channel, and today we are doing a video that is going to be part one of a series of 3. I know that I personally struggle with masculine cards because I like the flowers and the sparkle and the shine, and that just doesn't appeal to guys. So I wanted to focus a little bit, as Father's Day is upcoming, on cards that you can make for dad or for your husband, just to kind of help with the creative blockage that I know that I get. So hopefully some of the things in these 3 videos will help you. So the first thing that I know is kind of a go-to method or layout or technique for me when I'm trying to make a card for a male is find something they like. So think about things that they like. So maybe they like, I know for the longest, my son was into Legos. Maybe they like movies or a particular movie series. Maybe they are a fan of, maybe they like to fish or hunt, or maybe they like to write. Maybe they like to watch a particular actor. Maybe they like to go build in their shop. I don't know. Whatever it is, find something that they like and try to make a card around that. So for me, the men in my family, they like hunting and fishing, being out in nature. They also, my dad likes planes. My husband and father-in-law like John Wayne, old country and Western movies. My husband is always got several irons in the fire trying to do things around our house, whether he's building something or remodeling something. There's always an iron in the fire as far as building is concerned. So try to find something that they enjoy. So today we're going to make 2 cards. This first one is going to be kind of nature-ish. So I have a die set here, and I showed you that in the beginning. I'm not sure where this die is from. If you happen to know what this die is from, please drop that in the comments below so I can get it appropriately labeled. But I just found a very generic leaf that was kind of dainty, but still had enough meat on it that it didn't look too feminine. And then I took a piece of green cardstock and I added Forest Moss Distress Oxide ink around it, trying to kind of give it a glowing appearance in the middle. But Forest Moss just blended into this green cardstock too much. This is, both of the colors of cardstock I'm using today are from Cardstock Warehouse. I apologize, I'm not sure what colors they are, but that's where I did purchase them from. But the Forest Moss just blended in too much. So I added Rustic Wilderness on top, and it looks very splotchy here because it's still wet, but it will kind of dry and even out. You can still see some of that Forest Moss underneath that, but it will dry and even out and look a little bit more smooth. The next thing I did is kind of give myself a rough layout on these leaves, and I discovered I did cut out 5. I could get away with 4. This panel is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and I figured I was going to do some cutting down. So here I thought, well, maybe I want these leaves to have some ink blending on them too, since the background does. So here I took just a negative and then one of the die cuts, and I'm putting some more of that Forest Moss on there. I'm using kind of a larger blending brush than I probably should have, but I was just trying to see if I liked that. I end up trying to lay that on there, and it does the same thing that it did when I blended this on the background. I felt like it blended in too much. There wasn't enough contrast. So then I'm going to bring in that Rustic Wilderness again and see if I like that. Turns out that it's really pretty, but it just ends up blending into the cardstock, and I kind of like that modern, stark contrast, for lack of better words. So that's what I end up going with. Off screen, I added some Dollar Tree foam squares that I cut down to the backs of these leaves, to certain ones of them. I could have just die cut these out and stacked them together, but I just really didn't want to do all of that. So I don't know if I saved myself any time by by cutting down all these little tiny foam squares, but I went ahead, removed the backers off, and then I'm just trying to kind of place them down. I want to make sure I'm filling in gaps, but I also don't necessarily want these leaves to overlap. I think there is a spot where they overlap just a little bit, but it's not a huge deal. I'm gonna struggle trying to get these to lay down, and then I'm just gonna go through and flip this panel to the back and cut off excess so that I can use what I cut off to kind of fill in some gaps. So that's what you're gonna see me do here, is just kind of take some of those pieces that I've cut off and try to fill in some gaps. I do end up taking this to my Tim Holtz guillotine trimmer and chopping off 1/4 of an inch from the top and one side, just so that when I put this on its card base, I have a little bit of a border showing around it, and that helps kind of draw the eye in and make this look like it was complete or cut from a larger panel than it was. I have a piece of that same green cardstock that I cut the leaves from, and I have this Honeybee Stamps, what's it called? Let me see here. One second. A Honeybee Stamps Kiss the Cook die set. And it has some Father's Day sentiments on there. I think it was meant for like Father's Day. And I have this Dad, You're the Best. Now, I'm stamping that in the Rustic Wilderness Distress Oxide ink on top of that. And I'm going to stamp it several times. I think this ink pad needs re-inking. But I'm going to stamp it several times just so that I can make sure I have a good solid impression. Then what I'm going to do is something I did in a previous video, and I've seen Christina Werner do this also, where she takes a pencil, because I don't have the dies for this, and I'm not even sure if there are dies, but I take a pencil and I go around it and kind of outline where I want to cut this out, because I didn't want this to be a big blocky sentiment. I kind of wanted it to have some flow to it like these leaves do. So I went around all of it, and then I thought, I don't like how there's kind of this large gap between the Dad and the You're the Best. So I ended up going around and kind of outlining Dad and You're the Best, and they will be separate on the card. So don't be afraid to rearrange your sentiments. If you've got something that is on 2 lines and you need it on 1 to fit the layout of your card, don't be afraid to kind of, and vice versa. Don't be afraid to kind of alter your sentiments so that they fit what you need them to be. You can do masking. You can actually cut your stamps apart. You can do like free range stamping and stamp with just an acrylic block. But that's another thing that you can do to kind of get more mileage and use out of the products that you have. So here I am just fussy cutting this. I am keeping the scissors straight in my dominant hand and trying to move the paper with my non-dominant hand. As I get larger sections, I try to chop those off so that I'm not fighting the paper as much. This is a heavier weight cardstock. It's 110 pounds, so it isn't so floppy and flimsy. And so when I'm doing a lot of this die cutting, I find that if I chop off the excess, I don't bend this cardstock as much, and I definitely don't have as much fighting me back. I did take my eraser and kind of go around the edges and clean those up of any pencil marks that were remaining. When I set this on my card, I thought the same thing. I feel like this is blending into the leaves. It's not standing out. And so I took a little risk because I've cut these apart. So it's not like I can put them back in my MISTI and stamp them in the same spot. So I took a risk and I took that peeled paint. I took the peeled paint and I just a little mini ink blending brush and I went all over this die. I figured because the Rustic Wilderness is much darker than the peeled paint, I'd be okay. And I was. I thought for a second there that I had ruined it. And I was like, no, it's wet. Just let it dry, kind of clean some things up, come back to it, take a look. And I laid it back on the card and I thought, okay, this will be all right. It's standing out enough. You can still read the sentiment. And it still looks cohesive along with the arrangement I have. So I discovered I had some my sentiment is not glued on at this point, but I discovered that I had some foam squares that were kind of peeking out. I was going to put it on this fairly dark card base, and I thought, man, those stick out like a sore thumb. So I took that Rustic Wilderness and that same mini ink blending brush, and I'm just lightly going over the edges of the leaves that are on the edge of the cardstock. That was in an attempt to kind of give those a little bit more interest, but also to try to hide such that stark white foam tape that I was using. There is black foam squares and foam tape on the market. I just don't have any. And so this was kind of the fix that I had for that. So like I mentioned, the men in my family like the forest, they like going hunting, they like being in the woods, but they also like fishing. And so I have this stamp set from Catherine Pooler. This is called Fly Daddy, I believe. And I had some fish that I'd done previously. I think I did like distress inking, like ink smushing on them. And I thought, okay, well, we're just going to go ahead and use these to save a little bit of time and to use what I've got. So I thought that I would add some more distress oxide ink on the top. I think this is where this card went slightly awry. So I end up fighting. I end up fighting with this ink quite a bit. So I love distress oxides. I will never get rid of them. I will continue to get each new color that he comes out with because I think they're a wonderful, wonderful product that you can use in so many ways. However, I wish for this I would have switched to a dye ink. As I go and I continue to add more distress oxide on top of one another, I don't feel like I was getting as much contrast as I was looking for. And so I wish at this point I would have switched to a dye-based ink instead of a pigment-based or a hybrid. But I am going through and just trying to add some more color. I've got kind of this base coat of color with the previous method I think I did, which was, I think, ink smushing. So I've got a good base color, but I want to have more. So I'm going to go through and just with a mini ink blending brush, and I will list the colors that I use down below in the video description, but I'm going to add some more colors, some more vibrancy, some more depth, and some more variation. And I fiddle with this quite a bit, actually. So again, I wish I would have switched to a different ink color or a different ink. What's the word I'm looking for, folks? Different ink formula. But I didn't. So learn from my mistakes, do as I say, not as I do, and at this point, switch to a different ink formula. So I've got those all inked up like I sort of kind of wanted. And now I'm going to take this this stamp set, and it has kind of more detail layers. So this does obviously come with a die, and I just die cut that out from some craft cardstock just so that I could give myself a landing place as I was going to be stamping multiples of these, and I wasn't sure how ink was going to layer on top. I decided to kind of make things a little bit easier for myself and make multi-stamping a much smoother and quicker process. So here I'm just lining up these stamps, and I'm going to stamp them in more of that distress oxide ink. And then I discover that that is just melting in. It's just blending in. There's very little, if any, like definition. And so then I try some more inks, but I switch to a dye ink. So here I've switched to a dye ink, and it looks good right now. But as it dries, it like soaks into the paper and you really don't see any of that definition. This one that I'm stamping right here is the one that you can see the most definition on, but it's still not enough. It's not what I'm looking for. I think I've just got too much of that like pigment on there. And so it doesn't even have a chance to like absorb into the paper. It's just kind of sitting on top. It's just not responding like I wanted it to. And so I end up switching to a black ink. Here I've stamped it in some Gina K Amalgam Obsidian ink. I would normally have used my VersaFine Onyx Black, but that is, again, a pigment ink, and I feel like my problem is I have too much pigment ink on here. One of the things that I could have done is went ahead and stamped it in that VersaFine Onyx Black pigment ink and clear heat embossed it. That might have been really pretty. Or stamped it in Versamark ink and clear heat embossed it. That might have given me some more definition. Ugh. That's probably what I would have wanted to do. Now I wish I would have done that. Or you could have added some like clear glitter embossing powder. That would have been pretty too, because a lot of the lures and like fish, like when they kind of sparkle in the water. It's kind of cool. But those are other options. Now, as this is going to a guy, I decided, to kind of tone back sparkle, because I thought about putting like a clear glitter brush pen on the top of these or putting some glossy accents on the top. But again, dudes aren't really too fond of, glitter. So here I'm showing you the one I stamped in black is in the bottom, and the one I stamped in the blue, the cadet, is at the top. There's really not a whole lot of variation in definition, and that's really what I wanted, because I needed these to look like actual fish and not just a fish outline, if that makes sense. So I'm going to go ahead and finish stamping all these out. And then it's time to work on our layout. So I actually have some Dollar Tree foam squares again that I've cut down, and I'm going to pop these up because I'm going to make them look like they are hanging on a line. They've been caught, we're getting ready to eat them, and they're hanging on a line. So I'm going to add some foam squares to the backs of all of these, and then I'm going to take some washi tape and some some Paper Studio like baker's twine in kind of a creamy color, and add some string to it. I'm going to add the string kind of at the mouth because that is where it would be hanging, and all I did was just roughly cut off a length of string here. I didn't measure it, I just went to chopping and made sure I had enough for all of the fish I was going to try to hang. I do have an odd number of fish, that's very important. Odd numbers are more appealing to the eye, and so I wanted to make sure I had an odd number. I actually had 6, but like I said, odd numbers look a little better. So I'm just going to continue to add some washi tape and the string, and then we're going to start kind of gluing things down. I'll take all the backers off of these little fish, and we're going to start to adhere them down. Once they're kind of in approximately the location that I want them, I'm going to go ahead and flip this card over and lightly tighten this string. I just want it straight. I'm not trying to like come from the top row here. I just want it straight. And I'm going to apply more of that washi tape to the back. Here I noticed that I had some smudging. I'm just taking a mono sand eraser and kind of sanding that off. Again, just pulling that string to where it's straight and somewhat tight, and then taking some more washi tape and just kind of taping that to the back. No one's ever going to see any of that. It's just helping me hold everything in place without me having to worry about glue drying or that kind of anything like that. And this is very thin tape, so it doesn't add any bulk, which is also important because I am going to end up gluing this down flat to the card. I'm just trimming off some of that excess so that I don't have too much hanging around. And then I'm going to take my liquid glue and glue this down flat to my card base. I'm taking a sentiment from that same Fly Daddy stamp set from Catherine Pooler. It says, "You're so fly." And I'm going to add Dad above that. The reason why I stamped them separately in this VersaFine Onyx Black ink is because I wanted the Dad to be a little bit closer to the "You're so fly." And if I stamp them at the same time, I have to leave a gap, otherwise, or a larger gap, otherwise it won't stamp properly. So I decided I would just go ahead and stamp them separately, and I'm just going to continue to line these up in my MISTI so that I can stamp multiple times. I wanted this to be really crisp, clear black, unlike my lures, or my fish. One of the things that I did notice that was kind of a happy accident with those fish is that because there was so much like pigment on there, when I stamped with that Gina K ink, and I lifted the stamp off, it kind of gave it some texture as I lifted the stamp off. And so it made the scales look a little more realistic, or like I had intentionally added some texture to them. You can kind of see it in the videos. It's more obvious in real life. But that was kind of a happy accident, that it wasn't like a solid, even coverage of ink. To finish it off, I did feel like these fish needed eyeballs. So I went to my stash and found some black pearls that are small. And I'm just going to use my little jewel picker and some liquid glue and attach these in place. And then this card is all done. So that is it for me. Like I mentioned in the intro, this is video 1 of a 3-part series working on masculine cards, focusing on them, trying to make them a little bit easier and a little more attainable. But this is video 1. I hope you will come back for the other 2 videos as we continue to approach Father's Day. If you have any questions, feel free to leave those in the comment section below. Otherwise, I appreciate your time, and we will see you again next time.